times of Joshua. They read on the 15th. כפרים ועיירות גדולות, villages and large towns, קוראים ב-14, אלא שהכפרים מקדימים ליום הכניסה. So they read on the 14th, but the villages מקדימים, they advance, they do it earlier on the day of assembly. That's the day where you have the market and people come in, etc. Okay. This is not Mishnah Tanit, we're in Mishnah Megillah, for those who are interested. Okay, so before we continue, I want us to notice what is the topic of this Mishnah. What is the Mishnah talking about? You guys are welcome to pitch in here. What is the Mishnah talking about?
When the days we read the Megillah, depending on the way your city is built.
Okay, wonderful. That's a great topic. Notice something very interesting. I don't know, I don't have a totally good explanation for this. Maybe we'll discuss it later. But notice that if we did not know from the rest of the chapter or from general knowledge what Megillah we're talking about, or what month we're talking about, it actually doesn't say. A Megillah, Z Megillah, some Megillah, is read on 5 different optional dates, which is also a big surprise, but it doesn't tell us in which month, it doesn't tell us which dates, but it starts off with reading the Megillah on different dates according to what kind of city you live in. Let's continue. Before I continue, just notice I highlighted the words that have to do with reading, nikret, korin, etc. The words that have to do with dates, 11, 12, 13, and the words that have to do with the different places. Okay, I see I missed out also the word makdimim, which will come back also. Here, 1 second. Okay.
Jennifer,
yes.
Sorry,
Jennifer
can I
has
just ask? Thanks.
Yes.
When they have on the third line from the bottom, days of Joshua son of Nun, read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar. Is that?
That's because I didn't cut it out. You can see that in the translation, they translate literally, they put it in bold. And the explanations or the commentary.
Right. Just wanted to double check.
Okay, so I cut it out just to give, here I forgot to cut this one out, but to give the sense that it actually doesn't say it. Okay, so I'm continuing to Mishnah Bet. Ketzad. Okay, so how does this work? Chaliot 14 בשני. כפרים ועיירות גדולות קוראים בו ביום ומוקפות חומה למחר. All right, so we need to add information that the Mishnah assumes, but it doesn't tell us, and that is that we have the day of assembly, and that the day of assembly comes out on Mondays and Thursdays. That's the day when the people from the villages come into the city for the market, to sell the produce, to exchange materials, etc. Right? So the villagers, when they come into the city, there are different explanations, but we'll explain it this way. The villagers, when they come into the city on a Monday or on a Thursday, they take advantage of being in the big city, and that's when they read the Megillah. So the Mishnah is going to explain each day what happens. Interestingly, you might have thought that the Mishnah was written in a Christian country, right? Because it starts its week on a Monday, right? Ketzad. So if the 14th is on a Monday, so the villagers can read on a Monday. They don't need to come in early. They're coming in already. So they read on that day. Mukafot choma, those who have a wall around them, they read the next day anyway, because they're supposed to read the day after. So if it comes out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so the villagers come in on the Monday before, which is either if 14th of Adar comes out on a Tuesday, the Monday will be 13th. If it comes out on the Wednesday, the Monday would be the 12th. Okay? כפרים מקדימים ליום הכניסה, ועיירות גדולות קוראים בו ביום, so the big cities read on that, and מוקפות חומה will read, those that have a wall around them will read the next day on the 15th. חל להיות בחמישי, so if it comes out on a Thursday, כפרים ועיירות גדולות קוראים בו ביום, so the villagers and the big cities read on that day, because it's a day of assembly. מוקפות חומה למחר, because the cities with a wall will always read on the next day. חל להיות ערב שבת. Now this becomes interesting. It comes out on a Friday. כפרים מקדימים ליום הכניסה. So the villagers will read on the Thursday before. ועיירות גדולות ומוקפות חומה קוראים בו ביום. Those who have a big city or a wall will read on a Friday and not wait for Shabbos. Won't postpone it for Shabbat. חל להיות בשבת. What happens if the 14th of Adar comes out on Shabbat? כפרים ועיירות גדולות מקדימים וקוראים ליום הכניסה. So we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. So if you're in a big city, you'll, together with the villagers, do it on Thursday. ומקפות חומה למחר. Those who have a wall around them will read on the next day, just as they're supposed to do. And we get to Sunday at last. Again, this is very interesting that the Mishnah built it this way to start on Monday and end on Sunday, but I'll give you a reason in just a second. חל להיות אחר השבת, if it comes out after Shabbos, כפרים מקדימים ליום הכניסה. So the villagers, they come in early on the assembly day. ועיירות גדולות קוראים בו ביום ומוקפות חומה למחר. The big city is done on the 14th and those with the wall on the 15th. I'd actually like to ask you to think to yourselves, why did the Mishnah build it this way? Why didn't it start with Sunday and end with Shabbos? Why did it start with Monday and end with Sunday? What would you think? Any ideas? Yeah, Jennifer.
Could be two things that doesn't interfere with preparations for Shabbat. That's sometimes an issue, in our texts. Then the other thing would be for the villagers to be able to go in on the day, since they're far, it just makes it easier for them.
Okay, but you just answered what is our interest to allow these different dates. You didn't explain to me what is the interest of the Mishnah in structure. Why, when it is playing out all the different options, why did it start with Purim coming out on a Monday and didn't start with Purim coming out on a Sunday? Right?
Oh, well, because how would they prepare for Shabbat? They would just be coming off Shabbat.
But you still have to deal with it. The Mishnah does deal with the option of Purim coming out on a Sunday. That's their last option. Shabbat is a Sunday.
Right.
Okay. So now that the question is clear, why did we not start our week with Sunday and we started our week and our options with a Monday? Any other ideas?
Maybe because Monday is the easiest case to understand how it all works.
Okay, so you're telling me Monday is actually a very basic case, meaning on Monday, so almost everybody reads on the 14th, and those who need to read on the 15th, read on the 15th. That's like the classic case. And from there, we start with all the problematic cases where we need to divide between the big cities and the villages, etc. I want to continue what you're saying and say that Sunday is, we could call it the worst case scenario. Why is Sunday the worst case scenario? Because on Sunday, we move the villagers as far back as possible. Meaning the villagers can be one day apart from the city people. It could be 2 days apart. This is where they're most apart, where the city people read on Sunday and the villagers read 4 days earlier on the Thursday before. So that's sort of like the worst case scenario. We're going from the easiest case, the most classic case, and then we spread out the options. Okay, I think part of this also reminds us what an innovation we have here, where we give the option of fulfilling the mitzvah on different days. We don't have any other chag where we're so flexible, right? The village is a town, the city people, and the cities that have walls around them, they're more or less pretty much bound to the 14th and the 15th, except when it comes out on Shabbos or etc. But we're very flexible here for the villagers, that we're allowing them to fulfill a mitzvah that's connected to time on different options, on the 11th, 12th, the 13th, etc. Okay, let's continue to the next Mishnah. We can see we're still in the same, in terms of colors, etc. You can see we're still in the same field, in the same topic. When we talk about a big city that reads on the 14th, what do we mean? What are we talking about? Now, this is an interesting word. What are batlanim? The translation here gives 10 idlers. What does that mean? You have a big enough city for 10 people to walk around doing nothing? In Hebrew, modern day Hebrew especially, it sounds very judgmental. When you say somebody about somebody that he's a batlan, you translate it into English as a bum. He doesn't do anything, right? He's a bum. He doesn't do anything. So that's a definition of an ir gdola. That's a very interesting definition. How else might we understand the batlanim? We can understand the batlanim as people who don't have to go to work, and therefore they can allow themselves to sit in shul and learn and daven and be in charge of the spirituality of the area. That's why the city can afford or has enough resources to read the Megillah on their own, as opposed to the villagers who don't have resources, because they don't have people who have time on their hands to prepare the Megillah, to learn the Megillah, to take charge of the spiritual aspect of the village. Okay, pachot mikan. So these are 10 batlanim. We also reminds us of the minyan in shul, etc. Pachot mikan harei kfar. If you have less than 10 people who have time on their hands, we're already down to a village. Then the Mishnah says, Ba'elu amru makdimim velo me'achrim. On this topic, we say that you bring it in early, you advance it, but you do not postpone. Meaning the villagers, if Purim comes out on the 14th, it comes out on a Sunday, one might say, you know what, villagers, wait a day and come by on Monday. Why do you come in a few days earlier? Because that's the rule. The rule is that you come in early, you don't come in late. But, however, zman atzei kohanim v'tisha b'av chagiga v'hakel me'achrin velo makdimin. Okay, so we have here a list of topics, so we need to try to understand what they are. That on these issues, we actually postpone them and we don't advance them. What are these? Atzei kohanim. Anybody know what atzei kohanim is? Very weird idea. In the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the people came back from diaspora to Israel, so lots of people would give money and donate for sacrifices, for building the mikdash, but there was one resource that they didn't have enough of, and that was the trees to burn the sacrifices on the altar. My father, who works in a university, he always says, it's easy to find someone to donate a library or to donate books or to donate a lab, but nobody, for some reason, donates the toilet paper, right? Meaning toilet paper is something you have to have in a public institution, but for some reason, people, don't donate it. So in the same sense, people would bring in sacrifices. They would donate gold and silver and all kinds of things for the temple, but wood, they didn't have enough. So what did they do? They created holidays for people to bring in wood and donate wood, right? And then families took upon themselves to donate wood on certain dates, and that would become their donating wood holiday. Zman atzei kohanim. So if this holiday came out on a Shabbos, they couldn't bring it on a Shabbos, they would postpone it to Sunday instead of bringing it in earlier. So that's Zman Tzekwanim. Tisha B'Av, we all know, if Tisha B'Av comes out on a Shabbos, we postpone it. Maybe we're hoping that it never arrives, right? That by postponing it, Mashiach will already come. Chagiga is when you need to bring a korban on the holiday. So if the holiday comes out on Shabbos, you postpone it to Chol HaMoed. And Hakel is the time where all the people of Israel come in together to read the Torah. Also, if the date comes out on a Shabbos, you postpone it to the next day. You don't bring it in early. You can already notice that this list of topics has absolutely nothing to do with our general topic of our chapter. Our chapter is talking about reading Megillah, has nothing to do with bringing in trees on your tree holiday, right? Absolutely nothing. Why was it brought in? What's Mishnah telling us? Why was it brought in? What would we say? Yes?
Well, it could be the broader issue is what is the issue of when being unable to do something on the day itself.
Okay.
What does it say about time and the application of certain mitzvot, which seem to be prescribed for a certain time but can't be done? And how do you resolve these conflicts? And Megillah becomes an example, but it's not illogical to jump to other things from it.
It's an example, but it's also actually the not a good example because it becomes an exception. Exactly. Meaning we're comparing it. Yes.
But the Megillah is an exception. The Megillah is chutz la'aretz. The Megillah is from a separate history in Persia. And the rabbis are trying to integrate it and give us a hint of what you can compare it to.
Okay, very good. We're going to get back to that idea soon, okay? But let's just remember that also when you're comparing, you're putting in more issues and topics. The Megillah ends up being the exception because you do advance it and you don't postpone it. Okay, let's continue. I'm over here. Even though we advance it, we don't postpone it. Meaning these days where the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, where we read the Megillah for the villagers, it's not a Yom Tov. Okay? The definition of Yom Tov in times of a happy day, in times of Chazal, is are you allowed to mourn people? Are you allowed to have a fast? So you can read the Megillah and still fast and still mourn. Okay? And you can also give matanot le'ivyonim, which is interesting because there's a certain connection here between matanot le'ivyonim and reading the Megillah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, matai? When is this? Makom shenichnasim b'sheni v'chamishi. All of these exceptions where you can read early is only if there's actually an assembly on the Monday or the Thursday. אבל מקום שאין נכנסים לא בשני ולא בחמישי, אין קוראים אותה אלא בזמנה. If you don't have an assembly, you just read it on the days that you're supposed to read it. Okay? It's only an allowance that we make if the option is available. Okay, so up till now, we more or less mapped out the different possibilities and the different times. We continue to the next Mishnah, and we realize how hard it was for our forefathers to plan ahead. קראו את המגילה באדר הראשון, ונתעברה השנה. קוראים אותה באדר השני. What happens is you get to Adar, and you do Purim, and you read the Megillah, and then the year is become a leap year. We add another month. We add another Adar. Right? You thought Pesach is in another month, but no, you have 2 more months for Pesach. Okay? Now keep the house clean for another extra month, right? So there are those who are happy to get the extra month, and there are those who say, what? We already started cleaning. My whole upstairs is already ready, right? But here's the option. In the Gemara, they'll tell us that Chachamim understood that they can't do that. They can't add another month after Purim, because Purim is the time we start cleaning for Pesach. People aren't going to listen to you. But the option theoretically is still there, where they will make a leap year even after Purim, right? And you've already had Purim. You did the Suda, you read all the Megillah, etc. And now you need to do it all over again. And then the Mishnah says, En ben Adar Rishon le'Adar Sheni, ela kriyat Megillah u'matanot le'evyonim. There's no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar, besides reading the Megillah and giving the presents to the poor. We talked about the presents to the poor also before, but in a sense, what the Mishnah is saying, you actually have to redo Purim. I'll note in parentheses that the Mishnah doesn't mention or even seemingly recognize the idea of mishloach manot and a mishteh and I'm eating. Okay, so that's a big question why the Mishnah doesn't mention that. But there are those who understand from this that when you have two Adar, a first Adar and a second Adar, you have to do a mishteh on the first Adar. You have to make a celebration. You have to eat. And if you're eating, you can also give other people food. Right? Okay. Fine. Ein ben Adar harishon le'Adar hasheni ela kriyat Megillah u'matanot le'evyonim leads us to the next Mishnah. Ein ben Yom Tov leShabbat ela ochel nefesh bilvad. Ein ben Shabbat leYom HaKippurim ela shezeh zdono bidei adam v'zeh zdono b'keret. So there's no difference between the Yom Tov and Shabbos except for things that have to do with making food. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur except that Shabbat you are punished by a person, and on Yom Kippur you're punished by God. By the way, what's more severe, Shabbat or Yom Kippur? What's worse, to be punished by man or punished by God?
Well, David Hamelech said, God, let me fall into the hands of God rather than of man.
Okay, interesting point. I'll add another point, and that is Shabbos, if you're not punished by man, you're also punished by God. Meaning, on Shabbat, if you don't get whatever allotted punishment you have in the Torah, God will still take care of you. Meaning, being punished by man is worse than being punished by God, which for a lot of people is a surprise because we understand that Shabbat is more severe than Yom Kippur. Shabbat, you're punished by man, whereas Yom Kippur, you're punished by God. Now, I don't know how many of you did prepare, but I hope you've noticed that we've totally gone off track. What is Shabbos and Yom Kippur and Yom Tov? What do they have to do with our chapter? But you can also already tell me what is the connection. What is the connection?
I keep thinking it's free association.
Meaning?
Following a train of thought, just wherever it goes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, Al?
That you've now brought in the Megillah, whatever that is, to Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's one discussion in one sentence.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's continue to the next Mishnah. Okay, but first of all, your name is MK. I don't know what that means. So I don't know how to quote you. But what was said here before was that it sounds like we're just continuing the train of thought. We've already, mentioned a certain expression, ein ben something and something, ela something. So let's just continue with ein ben Yom Tov leShabbat ela, ein ben Yom Shabbat leYom HaKippurim ela, and we'll see that it's going to continue in the next Mishnayot. Okay. 1 second. Ein ben hamudar hanaa michavero למודר ממנו מאכל, אלא דריסת הרגל וכלים שאין עושים בהם אוכל נפש. אין בין נדרים לנדבות, אלא שהנדרים חייבים באחריותם, ונדבות אינו חייב באחריותן. Okay, so we're going into a whole new world. It's a world that has to do with vows. When people, if anybody here does daf yomi, so you should feel right in. I mean, it's mamish the daf from yesterday or the day before. Multi Shabbos. So mudar hana'ah is when someone makes a vow that he will not enjoy or get any enjoyment from someone else. Okay? If he's just mudar ma'achal, that he's just not going to enjoy anything that has to do with food. So if someone says, I am totally forbidden by vow to have any enjoyment, then you're not allowed anything. But if you're only forbidding upon yourself something that has to do with eating, then you're allowed to walk through his backyard. And you're allowed to borrow a shirt. You won't be able to borrow a pan, but you will be able to borrow a shirt, okay? Ein ben nedarim lenedavot. This is also from the world of vows, but it has to do with sacrifices. You can make a vow to bring a certain sacrifice, or you can make a vow to bring a certain specific animal. If I say I'm going to bring an olah, now I have to bring an olah. Even if the one that I picked out got lost, I'll need to pick out another one. If I say this animal is going to be an olah, that's a nidava. If this animal gets lost, what can I do? It got lost. I'm not responsible to fill it in. Again, we've totally continued off course, and it's obvious that we're in the world of ein bain, whatever to whatever. If that world sounded at least something close to our world, the next Mishnah, even less. Ein ben zav haro'eh shtei re'yot lero'eh shalosh el korban. So we're talking about a certain kind of sexual impurity, and how many times it happened. If it's 2 or 3, if it happened 3, you need to bring a korban in the end. If it happened 2 times, you don't, but you're still impure. We continue to another kind of impurity. En ben mitzora musgar le mitzora muchlat, ela pri'a ufurima. If someone has tzarat, the biblical leprosy, so in the beginning they're put in quarantine, right? Musgar, in quarantine. And then if you decide that they're really have tzarat, then they have their mitzora muchlat. It's a confirmed leprosy, and that has its special details, like tearing your clothes and growing your hair. En ben tahor mitoch esger letahor mitoch echlet ela tiglachat v'tziporim. Also, there's a difference when you come to become pure. So we're like going off track in all kinds of directions. We're going to, I want us to finish all these topics and then we can start discussing it. I'm hoping that you're thinking while we're doing this, what is the point of this whole block of Mishnayot? But in order to discuss, I want us to finish going through them. The next Mishnah continues with the same phrase, Ein ben sfarim letfilin u'mezuzot, okay? Sefer Torah, as opposed to tefillin and mezuzah. אלא שהספרים נכתבים בכל לשון, ותפילין ומזוזות אינן נכתבות אלא אשורית. You can write a Torah in any language. Get to the Gemara, you'll see there's a big discussion and dispute and machlok and whatever. But tefillin ומזוזות have to be in Hebrew. Ashurit is the Chazal's technical term for the Hebrew language. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel אומר, אף בספרים לא התירו שיכתבו אלא יוונית. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, us in Torah scrolls, we only allow Greek because of the story with Septuagint, etc. Next, אין בין כהן משוח בשמן המשחה למרובה בגדים. We have 2 different kinds of kohanim, of priests. There's a different discussion what we're talking about, but many of the Parshanim say different ways of anointing the high priest. In the beginning, you would be able to anoint him with oil, and later only by wearing the special clothes. Merubeh b'gadim, he has more clothes than the regular kohen. So there's no halachic difference between the 2 of them. Ela par haba al kol mitzvot. What you bring, what korban you bring when the kohen transgresses the mitzvot, and ben kohen meshamesh the kohen shavar. Now we're talking about a priest who is now in active service, or one that came in to serve instead of his friend, and then we don't need him anymore, so he's gone past. So a kohen that used to be a kohen, used to be a high priest, and now is in pension, he's still allowed to do some of the things that a high priest does, but not Yom Kippur and a certain kind of mincha. 2 more Mishnayot, and then we can start our discussion. Ein ben bama gdula bebama ktana ela psachim. Oh, what's a bama? Bama is a private altar, okay? One that's not in the mikdash. This is very interesting. We have a whole chapter in Dvarim that talks about the fact that you're not allowed to sacrifice anywhere you want. You're only allowed to sacrifice in the place that God chose, right? So supposedly there's no such thing as sacrificing in a private altar. And when you go to the book of Melachim, you'll see that they keep on being reprimanded for bringing sacrifices to the altars. However, Chazal understood that when there isn't a mikdash, then you're allowed to sacrifice in the altars, meaning the prohibition to sacrifice in the bamot is only when there's a designated mikdash. So when you're allowed to sacrifice in the bama, there could be a bama gdola, which is a more public altar. You can be a bama ktana, which is a private altar. So you can bring whatever you want except for the Pesach. The Pesach comes only to the public altar. Zeh haklal. So we have here a rule. Kol shu nidar v'nidav karev babama. You can bring to the altar anything that you bring out of your own free will, that you can vow or you can bring because you contributed. But b'chol she'eno lo nidar v'lo nidav, meaning if it's not of your own free will, but it's something that you have to do because this is it's a chatat, a sham, something that you're obligated to do, you don't bring on the altar, you bring only in the Mishkan or the Mikdash. Our last Mishnah, you're holding in there, En ben Shiloh Yerushalayim. So we just talked about the fact that you're allowed to sacrifice in the altars when there isn't a designated chosen place. We know of two main designated chosen places. One is Shiloh and one is Jerusalem. Most people forget about Shiloh because for them there's only one place that God chose, that's Jerusalem. Not only that, we have a lot of sources that talk about the centrality of Jerusalem. However, if you open up Yirmiyahu, when Yirmiyahu is trying to convince the people of Israel that the Mikdash can indeed be destructed, he says, I've already done it. I already had a chosen place that I destroyed. Go to Shiloh. Go check and see what happens there. So Yirmiyahu is talking about Shiloh as a chosen, designated place with the same sanctity of Jerusalem. So now we need to compare. אין בין שילה לירושלים, אלא שבשילה אוכלים קודשים קלים ומעשר שני בכל הרואה, ובירושלים לפנים מן החומה. So there are certain sacrifices that people can eat. Sacrifice or the maaser that any person can eat, but they need to eat it in the designated place. In Shiloh, there wasn't a wall. So as long as you saw the Mishkan, you can eat these sacrifices. In Jerusalem, there was a wall, so you needed to eat it within the confinement of the wall. And in both places, in both places, if you eat, the Kohanim eat the part of the sacrifice that they need to eat, which is of a higher level, they need to eat it within the boundaries of the temple itself. After Shiloh, you were allowed to bring sacrifices on the altars. There was heter bamot, but once Jerusalem was sanctified, we are not allowed to now sacrifice in the altars because there's no heter, no permission afterwards. We finished the chapter. It's a long chapter. It's not an easy one. And it also introduces us to a million different topics. We thought we were talking about Megillah reading. And on the way, we talked about Kohanim and about Bamot and about sacrifices and about different kinds of vows, etc., etc. So now is a time where I'm going to ask you, what do you think? Why are we just going with our train of thought? We said Ein Ben something to something, so let's just bring in all the ones that we know. I'll tell you a secret. It's not all the ones that we know. You go through the texts of Chazal, you'll be able to find a whole bunch more that didn't make the cut, meaning we didn't bring in all the ones that we found. Okay? I want to also add another point before you answer. Some of them are, okay? Those of you who do the Afyomi, know that the Mishnah of En ben mudar hanaa michavero lemudar mimenu ma'achal ela drisat haregel v'kelim she'osim b'hem ochel nefesh appears in Masechet Nedarim. So, if we're going to lose our train of thought, why do it in Megillah? Why don't we do it in Nedarim? Go to Nedarim and put in this whole big list. Okay? We have also the Mishnah of En ben Shabbat leYom Tov, and ben Yom Tov leShabbat ela ochel nefesh bilvad appears also in Masechet Beitza when it talks about Yom Tov. So, if you're going to bring in the whole package deal, you could have done it there. Why did you choose to do it here? That's my question. Right? So, what are your answers? What are your thoughts on the topic? Yes.
I guess
Michael.
what I was thinking of and just looking some stuff up in the process, and it may build on what Zach mentioned before, so that helps stimulate it. Megillah here and Purim has been normalized into the regular flow of things. Ein bain for Megillah, ein bain for these other things. And the question I would have, because so much of the Megillah is so different than, and what he mentioned before about the diaspora and the lack of the absence of so many other traditional elements, and even the nature and way Purim with later the drink, I mean, there's something, and whether the Megillat Esther was the last book canonized in Tanakh. So I guess my question is the Mishnah here playing out some resistance to Purim that then normalizes it and says this is just like everything else, despite the fact that it really isn't?
Okay,
So
that's a good
question.
point. It's also an answer. Meaning, what you're saying is, you feel that it's being normalized, and from the fact that it's being normalized, you hear a certain hint to the fact that there might have been some kind of resistance. It could have been an active resistance, but it also could be some, qualms that people had, a certain stomach ache, that people, it wasn't working with them well. They weren't quite sure about it, and this kind of helps them feel better about it. Okay, any more ideas? Okay, so I want to go with what you're saying, but I want to also support it a little bit more with some literary tools that we can notice. Jennifer, did you want to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm going to have to sign off and sign back in on my phone. So I'll just be listening from my phone. I have to pick up my mom, and I just thank you all so much.
Yeah,
I'm learning
no
so
problem.
much.
Fine. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to take you down and I'm going to show you now. First of all, I brought in the manuscript. The reason I brought in the manuscript is after 2 weeks ago, we also brought in some manuscripts, is just for one Mishnah. The Mishnah in Mishnah Yud Gimel, I'll go back a second, in not Mishnah Yud Gimel, Mishnah Zayin. Mishnah Zayin had 3 ein bains. אין בין זב הרואה שתי ראיות לרואה 3 אלא קורבן, אין בין מצורע מוסגר למצורע מוחלט אלא פריאה ופרימה, אין בין טהור מתוך הסגר לטהור מתוך החלט אלא תגלחת ציפורית. Okay? But in the manuscript, we have only 2 ein bain. אין בין זב הרואה שתי ראיות לרואה 3 אלא קורבן, אין בין מצורע מוסגר למצורע מוחלט אלא פריאה ופרימה ותגלחת וציפורים, meaning we have a discussion about the zav and a discussion about the mitzvah, and these are 2 separate discussions, not 3. Why am I bringing this? Because if we want to notice the literary structure of this whole block of Mishnayot, we can notice that most of them are paired. The first one comes on its own. אין בין אדר ראשון לאדר השני, אלא קריאת מגילה ומתנות לבנים. That stands on its own. But then Mishnah Hay has, אין בין יום טוב לשבת, אלא אוכל נפש בלבד, אין בין שבת ליום הכיפורים. Can you try to give me a title just for Mishnah Hay? something that will combine both Yom Tov and Shabbat and Yom Kippur? What are these? What's characterizes these two lines? Michael?
No, I was thinking of something, but I don't think it's right.
Okay, well, if you allow me, I'm going to write here holy days. Okay? We're talking about different kinds of holy days. Shabbos is a holy day, Yom Tov is a holy day, Yom Kippur is a holy day. Shabbos also appears in both of them. We're talking about holy days. Let's go to the next Mishnah. Next Mishnah talked about a person who had forbidden on himself by vow enjoying from his friend or eating from his friend, and then talked about different kinds of sacrifices, the nidarim, the vows, and the nidavot, when somebody contributes without making a vow. So can we give a title to this pair? Again, we have a pair, and I want you to notice the pair has a certain kind of a common denominator, because our mudar is a vow, right? Second, our mudar, let's see if it works. Our mudar is a vow, and also a neder is a kind of a vow, right? So we're talking about different kinds of vows, both in the first line and in the second line. And if you would allow me, I would call it holy speech. No, there was an irony. Did I read it correctly? Okay. So we had holy days and we have holy speech, meaning how my speech causes a certain kind of holiness or a certain kind of halachic status. Okay. Let's go to the next Mishnah. En ben zav. We're talking about the zav, which is a certain kind of sexual impurity. And we're talking about the mitzorah, which is a different kind of impurity, right? So we could say that the title of this pair is impurity. You can do that, but I don't want to do that. I want to notice that we're talking about them becoming impure, but we're also talking about them becoming pure again. And then they bring a korban. So we have impurity that leads to holiness, to bringing a korban, to connecting back to the mikdash. Let's continue. And ben sfarim letfilin umezuzot. If you notice now, we have only one. We don't have a pair. We have the books and the tefillin and mezuzot, and we put in extra words to make it sound a lot, but in a sense, we have only one. It stands on its own. But if I'm going to give it a title, you guys work with me. What title can we give it?
Holy writing.
Holy writing. Okay, very good. Holy writing, holy scripture, however we want, right? Now you guys can see where I'm going with this, and let's go to Mishnah Tet. Mishnah Tet is talking about, we have a pair, and we're talking about different kinds of kohanim, right? So we're talking about holy people. If we continue on, the next pair of Mishnayot, they seem a lot of content, but again, we have here a pair of comparisons between the big bama, the big altar, and the small altar, and between Shiloh and Yerushalayim. So help me finish up our titles. This time we're talking about
holy place.
Holy places, right? Okay. So why is this important? So we can see a few things. We can see we have our first one over here, and ben Adar Rishon le'Adar Sheni, which stands on its own, but also our Sfarim, Tefillin, and Mezuzot stand on their own, right? So in a sense, the Mishnah is making a comparison or a certain connection between what do we do on Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni? We do Kriyat Megillah. We're talking about also holy books, holy writing. Okay? So we have here is a certain connection that the text creates between the holy book of Adar Rishon and Sheni and the holy books of the other kinds of scripture, which is the Sefer Torah, the Tefillin, the Mezuzah. So this stands on its own and this stands on its own, but it becomes a pair. What else do we have here? We have here a lot of Mishnayot that deal with holiness. So if we're going to try to ask ourselves, what is a Mishnah trying to teach us? The Mishnah, in a sense, what I would like to clear, and I think you've been saying this, is the Mishnah here is saying, not only, as you said before, we have all what we're used to, and we're sort of normalizing the Megillah. I want to say even more than that. The Mishnah is noticing the idea of the continuum, meaning we have holy days, but not all of the holy days are as holy as others. We have greater holiness and lesser holiness, and we have a certain continuum. We have different kinds of holy speech. Some create obligations, some create prohibitions, and some even create kedusha, holiness. There's a certain continuum. We have a continuum in the world of impurity. We have things that are more impure than others. And interestingly enough, the more you're impure, or the higher intensity of your impurity, the greater intensity of coming back to the mikdash. Meaning, if you're only quarantined mitzorah, then you can just get out afterwards. But if you're a profound mitzorah, afterwards you're going to need to come to the mikdash and bring a korban. Meaning the impurity, the higher impurity, actually is the opportunity for a greater connection to the mikdash. So again, we have this certain kind of continuum. Then we have a continuum in the holy people. And we also have, and I think this is very, very important, we have a certain continuum in the holy places. Now, why is this very, very important, the continuum in the holy places? Because a lot of the things that build our religious world, especially the religious world that has to do with time, has to do with mikdash. All our chagim evolve around the mikdash. Rosh Hashanah, you have the idea of blowing a shofar in the mikdash. We won't go into that, but it's definitely a motif. At Yom Kippur, definitely most of what you do is in the mikdash. Sukkot, you have korbanot in the mikdash, and you're supposed to come to the mikdash. You have Aliyah Regel, also on Pesach, and also on Shavuot. The whole Jewish timeline evolves around the mikdash, and then comes in Purim and says, okay, we're going to do a chag, we're going to have a holiday, and it has nothing to do with the mikdash. It's not connected to the mikdash. So first thing we want to say is that's okay. We have different kinds of holy times. We have holy times that are more connected to the mikdash and holy times that aren't connected to the mikdash. Yom Shabbos is also a holy time, and you don't go to the mikdash on Shabbos, right? Shabbos is also, so you have Shabbos, you have Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, you also have Purim. But it's not only that, even in the world of holy places, we had a continuum. We had times when you had a mikdash, and you had times when you didn't have a mikdash. You have different ways of worshiping God, even when there isn't a mikdash. Not all of our religious world has to evolve around the mikdash, because the Torah itself also gave the option of worshiping God and finding spirituality in the time when there isn't a mikdash. So this whole block, when you put it into the Mishnah, it normalizes the idea of having another chag and having another holy reading. But it also says, you know why it's normal? Because the Torah itself created a continuum. We're just adding something on the way. Now, I want to add another thing, that this block itself also has a lot of interplay within it. Okay? Not only do we have the reading of the Megillah that connects to the writing of the different scripture, but if you notice, we started with Ein ben Yom Tov Shabbat Ochel Nefesh Bilvad, right? So our Ochel Nefesh appears here, but lo and behold, it's going to appear also next to Mishnah. Ein ben hamudar hana'am mechavero lemudar mimenu ma'achal, the different kinds of vows. If you forbid enjoyment, or you forbid, or you forbid eating, the difference will be, does it have to do with ochel nefesh, right? Sal, did you want to say something?